Crookston Castle is usually described as Glasgow's only surviving medieval castle, but that may now be the least interesting thing about it. A recent geophysical survey has found the remains of at least 5 prehistoric roundhouses in this hillside, along with the signs of what may have been a palisaded enclosure. Long before the Stewarts built in stone, and long before Glasgow grew around this place, people were already living here. That changes the way you look at Crookston, because this is not just a castle story anymore. It is a story about a hill people kept choosing century after century, long before anyone called it Crookston. To understand why, start with the hill itself. It rises from the surrounding land with clear sightlines in every direction. The Leven water runs below. Woodland once surrounded it on all sides. High ground, fresh water, natural resources within easy reach. To anyone arriving here for the first time in any century, the logic of this place would have been immediately apparent. Good ground for survival, good ground for defence, good ground to stay. And so they did, again and again, across thousands of years. Different people arrived at the same conclusion about the same hill. This is not coincidence. That is something older than recorded history, a kind of human instinct that cuts across language, belief, culture and time. The hill kept passing the test. The first people we now know lived here, built in timber. Circular structures arranged across the hillside, the kind of buildings associated with the Bronze Age or the Iron Age. At least 5 roundhouses have been identified beneath the grass by the recent geophysical survey, along with what may have been palisaded enclosure. We do not know what they believed, or what language they spoke, or what eventually drew them away. What we know is that they looked at this hill and made the same decision that every person after them would make. This is the place. The next layer arrived with a Norman noble called Robert de Croc. Granted these lands in the 12th century, he built what men of that time built when they wanted to hold a place. Timber and earth, a raised fortification on high ground, practical, defensible. The same high ground, the same water below, the same logic applied 1,000 years later by a man who almost certainly had no knowledge of the people who had stood on this hill before him. De Croc did more than build a fort. Around 1180, he founded a chapel on the same ground. Its remains have since been uncovered, and his name stayed. He pressed it into the landscape so thoroughly that the village itself still carries it. 800 years later, this corner of Glasgow is still called Crookston. When the Croc's line died out, the land passed by marriage. By the 14th century, it was in the hands of the Stewarts of Darnley. Another generation, another choice, the same hill. Around 1400, the Stewarts built in stone. The design was unusual, almost unique in Scotland. A large central block, 3 stories high, with square towers at the corners. From above, the castle formed an X shape. The public rooms in the central block, private accommodation in the towers, the whole structure rising from within the earlier defensive ditch that de Croc had cut out the hillside 2 centuries before. They were not starting from scratch, they were adding a layer. This was the moment Crookston changed from a timber fort on a useful hill into a permanent seat of power. The Stewarts intended to remain, and for nearly 300 years they did. Then came 1489. John Stewart, Earl of Lennox, chose the wrong side. A rebellion had broken out against King James IV, who was only 16 and had recently come to power after the death of his father at the Battle of Sockieburn. The rebels may have thought the youth meant weakness, but they were wrong. James moved quickly and he moved with force. The royal gun train was brought from Edinburgh, possibly including Mons Meg itself. Mons Meg was one of the great siege weapons of medieval Europe, capable of firing a stone ball weighing more than 300 pounds. It was more than a cannon, it was a warning made out of iron. When a 16-year-old king is prepared to drag that kind of weapon the entire width of the country to make his point, the point tends to get made. The western end of Crookston was badly damaged. The 2 western towers were never rebuilt, The damage is still written into the castle today. The missing towers are part of the story. The siege was brief, Lennox surrendered, but notice what James did not do. He did not abandon the site, he did not tear it down. Even a king who just demonstrated its vulnerability understood that this hill was worth holding. The castle endured. 55 years later, it was caught in another struggle. By 1544, Scotland was being fought over by factions competing for the control of a child. Mary Queen of Scots had become a queen when she was only 6 days old. Now she was an infant at the centre of a European power struggle. The Earl of Arran and Cardinal David Beaton, two men with very different visions for Scotland's future, jointly besieged Crookston while the Earl of Lennox was pinned down defending another of his strongholds. Crookston fell with little difficulty. Arran installed gunners in the castle the following month. Consider what that means. Two of the most powerful men in Scotland went to trouble of besieging and garrisoning a castle on a hill, what is now the south side of Glasgow, not because of sentiment, because the hill still mattered. It always mattered. Henry Stewart, Lord Darnley, was born in 1545. Tall, reportedly handsome, and dangerously well connected. Through his mother, Margaret Douglas, he had a claim to the English throne. He was 19 when Mary Queen of Scots first met him at Weems Castle in February 1565. She was 22. The marriage moved quickly, too quickly according to some. Mary was queen, Darnley was ambitious. Politically, the match made sense. Personally, at least at first, there does seem to have been a genuine feeling. Crookston was Darnley's family castle, and it is here, under a yew tree in the castle grounds, that their betrothal is said to have taken place. As always with romantic history, the story comes with shadows around the edges. Other accounts place betrothal elsewhere. Sir Walter Scott later suggested that Mary watched the Battle of Langside from Crookston Tower in 1568. Scott was a great writer, he just occasionally forgot to check the map. The hill faces the wrong way. But the yew tree is harder to dismiss. It stood for centuries after Mary and Darnley were gone. A living thing attached to their story, rooted in the same ground as the castle itself. When it was finally felled in 1816, a model of Crookston Castle was carved from its timber. That model was still held in Pollock House about a mile and a half away. The marriage it supposedly witnessed lasted less than 2 years. Darnley was murdered in February 1567. He was 21. Another layer, another life absorbed into this hill. After Lennox Stewarts, Crookston passed through the usual hands of power. More Stewarts, then the Dukes of Montrose, then in 1757, the Maxwells of Pollock. The castle had been sliding into ruin for generations by then. It took a royal visit to finally prompt someone to do something about it. Queen Victoria came to Glasgow in 1847, and the Maxwells carried out enough repairs to make the old place presentable. Centuries of siege and rebellion, and aristocratic neglect, and what finally got the job done was the prospect of the Queen coming round. In 1931, Crookston made a different kind of history. It became the first property acquired by the National Trust for Scotland, gifted by Sir John Stirling Maxwell, one of the Trust's founding members. By then, Glasgow had already begun closing in. The hill that once watched over woodland and water was being surrounded by streets, houses, roads, and the ordinary movement of daily life. The city moved around the hill stayed. During the Second World War, the surviving northeast tower was used as an aircraft watchpost during the Clydeside Blitz. Men stood at the top of the medieval castle and watched the skies for bombers over one of the most heavily targeted industrial regions in Britain. Think about that for a moment.
They're past us, heading for the city.
Military minds in the 20th century, surrounded by the modern technology, looked across the landscape and made the same calculation that Bronze Age people made 3,000 years earlier. High ground, clear sightlines, this is the place. The castle that had faced Royal Artillery in 1489 was now watching the age of aircraft and fire over the Clyde. Which brings us back to the question the geophysical survey is now forcing us to ask: why this hill? Archaeologists can offer practical answers: elevation, water proximity, defensibility, resource access. All those things are true of Crookston, but they are true of other hills too, hills that were once used and then forgotten. What the research increasingly shows is that the longer a place has been chosen, the more likely it is to keep being chosen. There is something self-reinforcing about it. Each generation that builds here leaves traces, and those traces tell the next generation that this ground has already been tested, already been trusted, and is worth defending. The roundhouses under the grass are the earliest evidence we currently have of that process under Crookston. But the survey is not finished, the excavation has not started. Whatever is down there is still waiting. People sheltered here before history had a name for them. A Norman built a chapel on the same ground. A king dragged a cannon across Scotland to take it. A queen may have promised herself to a man under a tree that would outlive them both by 2 centuries. And during the worst bombing campaign Britain had seen, soldiers climbed a medieval tower to watch the sky. All of them, same hill. Each of them chose this hill. None of them knew the full story of who had been there before them. The hill was chosen before memory. The castle is just the part that left a mark.